Hi everyone, my name is Alex Newman with Creating Wealth Publications. Today we're here with Mark Ford.
Hi.
Thank you, Mark, for having us in your office this afternoon.
I'm happy to be here with you.
Perfect. Today we're going to be discussing the big idea. It's highly marketed as the key to producing successful copy. And Mark lately has had some new thoughts and theories on whether we should be concentrating on that or not when we are writing copy. So let's start with, why do you think most people get the big idea wrong?
Well, that's an interesting question. Why do they get it wrong? I think they get it wrong because the phrase big idea has a lot of promise in it. You feel like, well, if you just get the right big idea, everything else is going to go well. And so I think people want to believe that the secret to successful marketing and copywriting is to discover the big idea that's going to, bring in tens of thousands of new customers and make you millions of dollars. But, when I look back at my career in direct marketing, publishing, and selling all kinds of things from watches to TVs to services and whatnot, I don't think that more than maybe 5% of the sales that I've been involved with came from big ideas. Now, there's a problem because the first person that popularized that term was David Ogilvy. And by big idea, he meant an advertising idea like, let's sell cigarettes by showing a good-looking guy on top of a horse with a cowboy hat and a cigarette in his mouth. Mm-hmm. Now, that's actually not an idea at all. An idea is something like the sum is greater than the sum of its parts, or ergo sum, cogito sum. These are ideas. That's not an idea. A guy. What is it really, though? I was been thinking about what is that if it's not an idea? It's not a promise. I think it's a notion, is what it is. It's a notion about what kind of person would smoke Marlboro? Kind of a rugged, manly man, good looking. At the time it came out, it was everything you could want in a man. So the first thing I wanted to introduce was this idea of a notion, to separate it from an idea. And a notion is like an unformed idea. It's like a notion is this inchoate set of thoughts and beliefs we have about some topic, or question like what kind of person smokes Marlboros. So, but that in mainstream advertising, in general advertising, which is the kind of advertising that David Ogilvy did most of, when we're talking about TV advertising magazines and so on, you really don't sell with ideas per se. There are some ads that certainly do, but the majority of things are sold with notions. If you think about how perfume is sold, how expensive cars are sold, typically selling a car or a perfume has beautiful people on it in elegant surroundings, and or if it's a sports car, some kind of adventurous turn. These have nothing to do with thoughts. These are notions. And so I would say that in the general advertising area, what you do is you come up with notions that drive your campaign, and those notions direct the discussion about images. Like, I have a notion of the kind of person that would, the kind of woman that would put on passion. You give me an example. So, Dior or whatever
Dior
it
perfume,
is,
or buy a designer
versus
bag.
some other things. And so there is a difference between somebody that would wear Dior versus wear, give me another brand.
Commodity, which...
Or no, like Gap.
Oh, Gap. Okay, okay.
Right. So we have a different notion. Then we both understand it, right? So a notion, it's not an actual thought, but it's a semblance of a thought. It's that there's a difference between somebody that wears Dior and somebody that wears the Gap, and we even can imagine what kind of image. And so if we're doing an advertising campaign, we want to make the image, which includes the model, the setting, and the story. If it's a TV commercial or even a photograph, it has a story in it. We want those things all to represent the notion, because because if we have the notion right, then we tag into the desire, because all ads ultimately about desire. We're trying to create a desire. What is the desire? Well, it's not actually a desire to, we don't walk around with desires to dress in certain types of clothing or to wear certain types of scents. We desire to be loved and accepted and to be admired and to be included and all these basic human notions. So what we do in advertising, whether it's general advertising or direct advertising, is we connect a desire that is deep to the object or service that you're selling. So that's the equation you start out with. I want to sell, this football.
Okay.
And so I have to come up, I have to equate that football with some desire. The desire, and there's no definite rule of that. What the desire could be. Is it to be accepted? Is it to be admired? Is it to be, loved by a beautiful girl or whatever it is? The creative person has to figure out what the desire is, and then from the desire he has to go with the notion. So what is the notion about the football? This is, by the way, an advertisement I wouldn't want to take on because I don't really think enough about that. But so I'm gonna say that I'm gonna advertise this football to people that feel like they're nerds, and they're kind of out of it, and so the notion is that a nerd can't catch a football. So all right, well, I'm gonna somehow create a story about a nerd catching a football. Already I know
I get
this is going to be rejected by the ad agency. This is pretty absurd, but you get the kind of connection.
Right.
So in general advertising, we all start with the desire. If we're analytical about what we do as conscious advertisers, we start with the desire, and then we move from the desire to what I call the prism, which we talked about before. So the prism is something I wrote about 20, 25 years ago. It's a prism has three sides, and it gives you a full dimension spectrum of light to help you understand things. So the prism in advertising sales is beliefs, desires, and feelings. Beliefs / thoughts, desires / wants, and feelings / feelings are feelings. So there's a difference. So in other words, desire means what does the person want? Mm-hmm. The person wants to be accepted, or the person wants to be loved, or the person wants to be admired. Those are different desires. The feeling is, what feeling do I need to evoke in this story or this image to create that desire? So if we go back to the Marlboro Man, I need an image that makes this model look like, every man and every woman's
apple of their eye, essentially.
Right. So that's interesting because they didn't make him to be. They decided, either consciously or not, that they wanted the image to be wholesome as well. Mm-hmm. When you think about the most interesting man in the world, Dos Equis. That kind of is a version of it, and they decided that the most interesting man in the world wasn't going to be a young guy that was like a James Bond. He was going to be an older guy, like an ex-James Bond.
Right.
And I'm not sure why they did, but they created a set of feelings around him, which to me is more kind of family friendly in a way, and maybe a little bit less intimidating. Like if he was a young James Bond,
right.
Maybe a lot of the male and even maybe female would find it to be too
not as appealing. So it's in an effort to make a more appeal to a bigger demographic, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
So these are the things they did. Now somebody might have said, no, let's put a really good-looking guy in there, and all of a sudden the sales would have slumped because the feelings they weren't aware of the feelings they were evoking. And of course, the stories were great in that. They were in the most interesting man in the world. So the prison is those three things. Now, I teach those three ideas in terms of direct marketing. And so what I say to marketing people and copywriters is you start with a product that you want to sell. It could be a watch. It could be a dog grooming service. It could be a book. You have to ask yourself, what does my prospective buyer think or believe, feel, or and want from this book or service? And it sounds a little silly when you're talking about dog grooming service, but these everything we do, other than actually putting food in our mouths, is based on our desires that are floating around in our head. So you've got to kind of figure out those three things: the thought, the belief, and the desire. And often the desires are way more subtle and complicated, and so are the feelings. But in any case, that's what I would recommend. So everything we've talked about so far is this is at the core of creating advertising.
Right.
What is this?
So I was going to say, so before you start with anything else, you need to assess the prism and look at your audience as the first step when trying to uncover something.
Right.
Okay.
Now, look, you didn't ask me to give you my theory of how to create good advertising campaigns, but I'm going in that direction because when I was thinking about the history of the big idea and how it came to be so popular among marketers and why so many people, young marketers that I work with, have really no idea what it is or what it means, but they think they do, I started realizing that the problems in understanding it or even trying to figure out what it is, the reason why people don't is because often marketers don't work at this level. They're not trying to figure out what's really going on in terms of the psychology of your prospect. They're more interested in like gimmicks and techniques that they've heard, in the marketing
Formulas,
business. Yeah.
Things like that.
If you want to become a marketing guru, come up with 48 techniques that you can say can improve. This will improve your response rate by 36%. This will improve your revenue per order by 22%.
Specificity.
Yeah, marketers love that. Most of that stuff is entirely not true.
Right.
It proves, if you do enough of it, you'll find out that it doesn't really work. So I was lucky enough to be involved in businesses that grew very big when I was just beginning, and I had a theory about everything. I remember one of my first theories was I noticed that three of the dominant, this is when I was in the direct mail business, three of the dominant packages that were working at the time all were mailed in number 10 envelopes with a kind of a vanilla colored envelope and kind of a purple print on them.
Because it looks legal, you think?
I wasn't even sure, but I ran into my boss who became my partner. I said, "Oh my God, I discovered what this is. Look, these that's what we have to do." And so we all jumped on it. We made everything. Of course, nothing happened, And we were mailing way more than everybody else. So we were giving it a real test with actual reliable data coming out of it. None of them made any differences. So I love marketing gimmicks and tricks and techniques, but most of them don't work. And if you feel that do working and you're spending less than I would say $5 million a month on advertising, then you're probably kidding yourself because your numbers just aren't big enough to find out whether they really work. So my general view of things is to try to understand advertising from a little bit of a deeper level in terms of let your understanding of the person you're selling to guide your decisions about what does he want from this, what is he feeling about this, and what does he think about this.
So when we talk about other components to big ideas, a lot of marketers say that being intellectually interesting, emotionally compelling, and timeliness are all major factors.
Well, they should say that because those were my definitions. When I first tried to explain the big idea, I guess 20 years ago and 15 years ago, those were my definitions, and I don't think that they're Actually, it's interesting because intellectually interesting is certainly, if we're actually talking about ideas, something that's important for an idea package to work. Emotionally compelling is really my first breakthrough in understanding this because what I recognized was that there were plenty of idea packages, and we'll have to take a step back and talk about what's an idea in a second, but there are plenty of idea packages that I was watching out in the marketplace that weren't working. Most of them weren't working. And so there were plenty of idea packages that were working that from an intellectual point of view were very weak. In fact, if I had to say of the idea packages that I've looked at in my life, the 1,000 or so I looked at, more than half of the ones that were very successful had very weak ideas. They had intellectually uninteresting ideas.
Right.
They had ideas that were either banal or just plain wrong or misleading. I mean, so even though that I would say that an idea should be intellectually interesting, we'll get to that in a while, I gave that up and I started saying it needs to be emotionally compelling because after all, we know that the buying decisions are always made based on emotions,
right,
feelings, and notions and so on, and not on rationality. Rationality is what we do after we have decided, our hearts have decided we need this thing.
right.
And then we say, okay, go to work.
Break out the credit card.
The frontal cortex or whatever, and figure out how to rationalize this to the spouse when I get home. So so let me just jump back for a second because I kind of had that idea that had to be intellectually interesting, emotionally compelling, timely. Certainly is something that is very helpful, something that is going on today, but I think that a lot of people don't actually understand what idea means. And when people say big idea, almost, most of the time, they're not even talking about an idea. So here's what happened. David Ogilvy comes up with the idea of big idea. He means big notion. He doesn't even mean big notion because is the marble meant big? No, it's not big. It's just a notion that works, a notion that's projected, this product. Mm-hmm. There's a notion about the images and so on that he's projecting that relates to the product, and somehow it's not really an idea at all. It's just a kind of vague that he's trying to project. When it started being used in our industry, it started being used by Bill Bonner, who's now my partner. And Bill was an actual idea guy, and by that I mean he lives in the world of ideas. He believes in ideas. He's not interested in any other aspect of advertiser sales except ideas. Mm-hmm. There's so many other components of selling besides ideas. There's making promises, there's telling stories, there's coming up with emotionally compelling facts, there's closing the sale, there's this and that, but Bill never was really interested. He was just always really interested in, can I build a business by communicating the big ideas that I'm interested in, mm-hmm. such as macroeconomics and how it relates to character and so on and so forth, and that's what he's written about. So when Bill got into the newsletter publishing business, he came in first as an advocate of tax reform, mm-hmm. because he had ideas about what was wrong and right about taxation, and then he moved from there into travel, which was kind of interesting, a travel magazine, which was not really, International Living was his first newsletter, but then they got into investment newsletters, and Bill from day one was really interested in how does macroeconomic situation, the geopolitics and geoeconomics, how does it affect the dollar, how does it affect interest rates, and how do those things affect individual investments, stocks, bonds, and so businesses. On. And he's been a student of that, and he's been talking about it ever since. And he has all kinds of theories.
So I'm sure he's floating in theories right now.
He's floating in theories. He's an actual intellectual. He's an idea guy. And so when he would write copy, it would all be about his ideas. But because he was a good communicator, a good writer, and he had these ideas, he was able to sell back in that time period, which was I first met Bill, I guess in the 83 or something, 82, 83. Yeah. And he was doing extremely well as a copywriter, building a business for other investment newsletter analysts by connecting their investment strategies with macroeconomics and how these things work. And at that time, you had a very large base of customers who were my parents' age, who were living in a world that was dominated by ideas of my generation, which they felt were idiotic, and most of them were. And they were aching for somebody smart to come in and explain what was wrong with the world in their terms at that time, and that's what Bill did. So Bill really, in my opinion, created the Big Idea package. He was the first person to write advertising campaigns that actually had ideas in them, actual ideas. An idea is something, an intellectual concept that's debatable and that you can prove or disprove, and you can further and carry on, and so his packages were like that. And then, since he was so good at it, he became known as the idea guy. And since he was good at it, he didn't really care about anything else. Now, when I joined Bill, I had retired from the business I ran in Florida. And the business I ran in Florida, we sold everything from information products, such as books and newsletters, to watches and TVs. We were selling thousands of TVs every year. You name it, we sold, psychic services. I don't think there was anything we didn't sell. We were marketers primarily.
Right.
We weren't, we were certainly not idea people. And even though I like to think of myself as a person that likes ideas, before I joined Bill, our business had grown from, I don't know what, $100,000 to $135 million in like 7 or 8 years. But because we sold so many different things, most of our sales campaigns, I would say 90 to 95%, were based on things other than ideas. They were notions and images and promises and so on, all around, all these things around selling whatever it is that we were selling.
Right.
And there weren't a lot of, even when we sold books the way this company Boardroom and Rodale Books sold books. The businesses that sold books by direct marketing back then used this copywriter called Gene Schwartz, who was very famous, and he created a style where you would sell the book by what they call these fascinations. And basically, this is a book of, let's say, natural health cures from around the world. And so the promotion would start out with a lead paragraph, and it would say, 368 ways to cure yourself from whatever ails you.
Right.
And then the whole book would just be little bullets saying, this herb from Thailand can
put oxygen in your bones.
Yeah, exactly. and bullet. And that was a very successful format. Now, is that a Big Idea package? No, not at all. There's no big idea governing it. There was not overarching concept of how the world works the way Bill's packages were. So they were, I call those things little idea packages. They call them fascinations, but in terms of ideas, they were little ideas. But still, most of the, I started a lot of clubs. When I got into the investment and wealth building world, I instead of selling a newsletter, I decided to give people an invitation to join a club, because I felt that what they really wanted was to be accepted and to be validated. My thoughts are so. One of my most successful early promotions involved a club where, in the very beginning of the promotion, I had a box that said "What we believe," and that what we believed were all the things that I knew that the marketplace believed. That this younger generation, i.e., us, the baby boomers, don't know what they're talking about. They don't value hard work. They don't know that they need to have some financial privacy, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that's really what I was doing. And so there's all these things going around. But meanwhile, so when I went and joined Bill, I was introducing all these other kind of packages to his business. He was writing just these big idea packages. And what happened is as the business grew, when I joined him, that's the only thing they had. But as the business grew, the non-big idea packages became more and more common. And they were also much easier to teach people how to do.
Right.
You know, to write a good big idea package, you have to be very smart. You have to understand the idea, and you have to be a very good writer and a salesman, et cetera, et cetera. So eventually, we had Agora was writing every kind of advertising campaign you could name, of which I would say maybe 10 to 15% were big idea packages, and of those, most of them didn't work. But when they did work, they worked very well, and they brought in a lot more subscribers, and often those subscribers had longer lifetime value. So even though that the number of packages might have only been 10 or 15%, it's quite possible that the number of subscribers was 20 to 25%, and that the lifetime values was more like 30 or 35%.
Wow.
But that being said, we couldn't possibly have grown to where we grew if we relied just on big idea packages. Because even if you get the idea right, the big idea right, it doesn't mean you're going to have a successful packages, because it is a question of timing, but more importantly, it's a question of articulation.
Right.
So the example I give is basically, one of Bill's themes is that credit abuse, debt, will cause an economic collapse, which will cause the stock market to crash, and things will go to hell in a handbasket. And 3 or 4 of Agora's most successful packages in its history were based on that idea. But we wrote 30 or 40 packages at the very least on that. So 9 out of 10 of them didn't work at all. So why did the ones that work so well? Well, there's only 2 explanations for me, or one explanation, that the particular articulation of the idea at the particular time was what happened. That they had to say the same big idea in a particular way that worked in a given year when things were going on in the news, that the market was open for this. Now, if you read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, this is what the whole book is about.
Right.
It's about how products explode onto the marketplace. So anyway, so I used to try to, kind of negotiate between Bill's preference for big idea packages and my idea that, that's not enough. There'll be too big spaces. You can't build your business that way, which in some ways is fundamentally true. But I do think that Bill was very right about the importance of big idea packages when selling information. Because the one thing that it will do for you that all the other packages can't, it will keep your copy at the level of, it will have integrity.
Right.
Yeah, because you're talking about ideas that you think are important. And the people you're trying to bring in, you're not trying to just sell anything. You're trying to recruit people who care about the big issues and see them the way you do. Exactly. And in fact, today, that's more important than ever, because we have a situation, well, first of all, we have an opportunity through the internet and social media and all these platforms to do more content marketing. And content marketing is marketing that favors in the information publishing industry in general and ideas in particular. Okay. And so I think that, and at the same time, you have these platforms that are starting to regulate themselves and starting to tell people, well, you can do that, but you can't do that. They're cleaning up, let's say.
Right.
And what are they cleaning up? They're cleaning up all the other type of, they're cleaning up everything, but they're cleaning up packages that are over-promising, over-hyping, or being condescending, or...
Specifically with monetary values,
right,
stipulated.
monetary values. packages that do anything that are somewhat misleading. All these other, if you move away from idea in selling information to promise, it's easier to sell a promise. You just got to keep repeating the promise and giving proof of it, and people will eventually go for it because they want to believe in it. But once you do that, you get on a slippery slope where you're going to be tempted to do a lot of tricky things that are borderline misleading. You know, of course, you get everything run by legal, so it's technically correct. But
Right.
but you know, you overpromise, overstate. It leads you the wrong way. And I'm happy that there is all this regulation now, because I don't think that you need to do the easy things to do that copywriters will always do if you make it too easy. And I think if we move more in this direction of content, if we keep in mind, let's work more with ideas, then you're gonna avoid those problems in terms of producing copy that's not going to be allowed to be
Right.
used anyway. So yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about the evolution of this term, big idea. If you talk to most people right now, this is another problem with it. Everybody thinks that if they write a breakthrough package, they think it's a big idea. And so you say, well, what was the big idea? And they'll say, well, the package was based on, the headline is 4 words you can say to your bank teller to double your money, you know.
Right.
And then you read the package, you'll find out that you brought her a set of nickels, and they're a certain kind, and you bought her $5 worth of nickels, and she could trade them for $7. Now, that's it. And then
Right.
the rest of the promotion, other tricky little things that you could do.
Right.
So this is a small idea, gimmick package, slightly misleading, you know, with a headline. But the person that wrote that package will tell you
It's a
he
big
had
idea.
a really big idea, because wow, that really worked really well.
Right.
You know, so that's all people mean. In normal parlance, big idea simply means somebody wrote a package that probably had no idea content in it at all, and it worked. And for most people, that's all they care about.
Right.
I don't care what it did, what it said. If it works, let's knock it out. So the problem with all of that is, if you're creating advertising that's based on whatever works, you're going to get into a culture. You're going to develop a culture where everybody's knocking off the last thing that works.
Right.
They're looking at the surface of it. They're knocking it off. If they do a pretty good job of knocking it off, they won't do nearly as well as the first one, but they may do 50%, and maybe
Right.
that's good
That's
enough.
interesting that you say that, because one of the core components that a lot of people say is originality in terms of being a big idea. So it's like, if you're just stemming off of previous big ideas, it defies that whole component.
Right. Now, I will say this, that because I am also a practical marketer, if you see something that's blowing things away, and you knock it off, you know, in a way that's ethical, you know, you will, if it's getting 600% ROI, and you knock it off, you could very well get 300%. And why not, you know,
Right.
if that's all you care about. And that's why I also tell my clients, if they do get a hit like that, the first thing they have to do is knock themselves off. Because why not capture that 300% for you? Because there's going to be somebody else doing it. So,
Exactly.
But in the long run, when that's all you're doing, and I used to teach copywriters to, you know, knock off and make big promises, because I wasn't a big idea guy, and I know all the tricks, I know how to do it. But in the long run, everything degenerates, but the most important thing that degenerates is the intelligence and creativity of your advertising creative people, because they're going for the easy, the low-hanging fruit, and then you eventually get into a situation but they're also very competitive with each other. So they'll see something that, you know, you write something that's slightly condescending and or whatever, misleading, and then it works pretty well, and I say, well, I want to beat her, so I do it slightly more, and then the next guy does slightly more. So it's a downward spiral of trying, whereas a genuine idea package is the opposite. To beat it, you have to come up with a better idea. See, a more clever idea, a more compelling idea. And so it moves the creative energy in the other direction. You know, I believe ultimately that success is about uh, the amount of intelligent energy and work you put into a project. And by intelligent, I mean you remember your mistakes, you make mistakes, you keep notes, and you're earnest and so on. And so that's why I'm coming full circle to say, when in the world of information publishing, I think idea packages are very important, and they're going to maybe save our business. The good news is that because of content marketing, we can spend more money to introduce ideas, get people in. We don't have to sell them the way we used to in one sales letter. It's very hard to do that. Very hard to do that with a big idea, and that's why there's so few big idea packages.
Right.
But if it's content marketing where people aren't paying in the beginning, they're just paying to watch a video or read something that you've written, and then you give them a chance to read something else, maybe by leaving their name, and then after they've read your name, you get a couple more things, and finally you start selling them. That's a more gentle process, and it allows for you to really focus on the idea and build a business that way.
So when we're looking for big ideas then, where would you recommend to start?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, it depends on what kind of product and so on. If you're selling a book, I would say this. The first thing is that you have to know what an actual idea is. Right? I can't tell you how many times I'll ask people, what's the big idea? They say, stocks can make you rich. That's not an idea. That's not even a notion. It's a questionable statement of unlikely fact. It's so an idea is more like, if we're going to take stocks, the single best way to increase your wealth over a long period of time is to invest in large cap dividend paying stocks, right? That's an idea. You could disagree with me or not, and you build on that idea. So number one is understand what an idea is and what it's not. If you think an idea is, if you start your own business, you'll get rich, then you won't be able to create a big idea because you don't even know what an idea is. So let's start with that. And then then two is you need to actually know something about what you're talking about. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to know. So if you're writing for the health field and you're writing about vitamin D, and why you're selling a supplement that has vitamin D in it. So you need to do enough research to understand, the basics, like vitamin D is not actually just a vitamin, it's a hormone, and it's one of the most important antioxidant hormones. And then as you go further, you're going to discover that vitamin D is the single best natural substance we know that can prevent skin cancer.
And depression and all kinds of things.
Melanoma, and so on. And then you might discover that the very best way to generate vitamin D is by being out in the sun. So then all of a sudden now you have an interesting idea, which is the very best way to prevent yourself from getting melanoma is to go out in the sun a lot, as opposed to hiding from the sun and slathering. So you have to do enough research where it's okay if you go into it as a marketer copywriter without knowing too much. It's actually good in a way, because you don't want to know. If you know too much, then what's surprising to a beginner won't be surprising to you. You want to go in with a certain sense as a novice and discover the thing that's surprising. Like I brought that vitamin D thing up because I remember when I started researching the sun, I was like, there's no way that the sun could be bad for you. We're natural beings. It feels good. Obviously sunburns are not good for you, but sun. And so I started researching. And then when I found out that, for instance, the countries that have the most amount of melanoma are Scandinavian countries. The profession that has the least amount, lifeguarding. So these things become very exciting, right? Because now if you have been studying melanoma all your life, you're not going to be surprised by melanoma most appears between your toes, and in your
Really?
butt crack and places where the sun doesn't shine. Yeah. So those kind of things are interesting, and so that's the level you need to get, where you're discovering things that they're beyond the basics, but they're going to be of interest to your audience, who, in this case, if you're in the natural health business, your audience has already done a lot of reading already. They already know they know that vitamin D is an antioxidant and it's good for you and so on, but they haven't heard of these studies that I just mentioned. And so that's where you need to be. And to do that, you have to do your own internal research, but then you also have to go into the marketplace and find out what are the other advertising campaigns out there about vitamin D, and what are they saying, and how successful are they? What are the primary themes? What you want to do is you want to find, again, using the prism, you want to find in terms of what they think or believe about vitamin D, and what their feelings are about it, which sometimes could be in vitamin D. There's nothing negative, but with some supplements there may be some fear, and then what do they want? They want whatever the cure for whatever their problem is. And so by using the prism, you could and looking at all these other advertising campaigns, you could get a sense for what you think your market as a whole thinks, feels, and desires for that kind of product. So, for example, one thing that works very well I remember I was consulting with somebody that was writing an advertising campaign for krill oil.
Oh, okay.
Right. I don't actually know what krills are, but they're some kind of sea animal.
It's almost like a miniature shrimp. I feel like whales eat
right.
them for
That's
nutrition.
Right. There you go. Okay, very good. So, up till that point, when I was looking at the literature, they were selling fish oil as this great remedy for panacea. And we came across a study that showed that krill oil was like 30 or 100 times more powerful than fish oil, than regular fish. I'm probably exaggerating. I'm a salesman. It was probably 8 times.
I'd like to see the research on that.
Yeah. Let's say it's 8. I think it was 8 times, yeah. So that was the headline was 8 times more powerful than fish oil. Now, that headline worked because we knew that we were selling to a marketplace in the natural health area. You're selling to people that have a chronic or recurring problems.
Right.
And so you can be pretty sure that whatever you're selling them, they bought other products before. So when you looked at the promotional literature, it was easy to see that they already believed in fish oil because it did work. It's legit.
Right.
And so for something to be 8 times, I'm sold. I would believe they were sold from the moment that headline was out there. That was the sale, and after that, it was just filling in, giving proof of the. So to reiterate, I think you start with
knowing what an idea is.
Right, knowing what an idea is and looking for an idea. And so how do you figure out the idea? You have to start the basic research about the product that you're selling and what does your audience use the prism to figure out what they think/believe, what their feelings are, especially if they're negative feelings, worries. Anytime you come across that in the promotion, in an advertising challenge, you're going to have to, towards the end, you're going to have to start addressing every single one of those possible fears. That's a rule that you can't violate. If there are those lingering doubts or fears, they have to be addressed. Not in the beginning when you're selling the dream, but later on when they come up, and then you build your thought from there. In the case of the krill oil, this is what I would call an emotionally compelling fact, 8 times stronger than. So it kind of eliminates the need for an idea.
Right.
So perhaps it's not the greatest example, but I remember a package that I worked with one of my clients was about the internet. This is a long time ago, and why the internet was going to change the world, and the idea that he came up with was that the internet is going to change the world exactly the way the railroad changed the world when railroads came in, which was a massive change to economy and made millions, thousands of people very rich. So that is an idea. If you just said the internet's going to change the world, not much of an idea. The effect that the internet is going to have on the economy as a whole and on individual investors' wealth is going to be the same as it was with the railroad. So now, because of that was the idea, he decided very correctly to begin with a story. And the story was of the reader being in a railroad car back in the day, and he's about to invest in railroads. And so it was a fun story to read. It was almost like you were watching a movie.
Oh, wow.
And then by the time you got to page 3, you were super rich, and all this exciting stuff was happening. You were in the story, and you were sold. And so the idea was sold through a story, which is very common.
Right.
And anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm hoping.
Well, wait, would you say that selling an idea is easiest through a story? It's most common, but is it also the most?
Yeah, I would say that no, I wouldn't say it's the easiest. There's 3. Look, when you're selling an idea, you're definitely on the indirect side of sales copy. John Ford and I wrote a book called Great Leads, and basically we made the case that there are basically 6 archetypal leads, and 3 of them are direct, like making a promise, making an offer, and an invitation, and 3 of them were indirect.
Right.
When you're talking about selling idea packages, you're definitely on the indirect side. It's hard, you can't just. People just don't want to pay $40 or $500 for an idea. Look,
right.
Let me send you a package, and I'll open it up, and I'll have my idea in there for
They
you.
have to be emotionally involved and feeling compelled.
Right. It's got to be tied into the whole prism. So yes, generally speaking, you do the secret. Secrets can work very well. Like, there's. Did you know that under Paris there is an oil field that's larger than the oil fields in Texas put together?
Wow.
That's pretty intriguing, right?
That is
That's an
very
emotionally
intriguing.
compelling fact, right?
Right.
I don't think it's true, but it would be interesting, right?
Well, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I think it was. There's something like that. I remember reading. So that's what you're. So sometimes you can develop an idea through other methods, but yeah, I would say if I had to guess, story leads would be the most common. But since we're speaking about that, I just want to mention something that I've observed, that if you begin with a story lead, you should always go from the story lead to a secret to keep the reader's attention.
Okay.
And if you start with a
once
secret,
they're done with the story, they're done with it.
they're done with the story. They're kind of satisfied in a way. They finish watching the movie, and they feel that's the problem with stories. So they're kind of emotionally satisfied. They don't really need to buy anything now. The hero won, everything's good.
You want to keep them engaged,
but then you
moving.
got to keep them engaged. Well, you need to know the secret. If you begin with a secret and then you find out, that the secret is told in one sentence. This big, would you like to know more about it, or where it is, and then you tell them a story to keep them going. So I always mention that when people talk about stories and secrets, they almost always go in tandem, one in front of the other. But but in general, I would say that that's the process, that you should recognize what an idea is. You should use the prism to try to figure out what your prospect already believes about this product and its environment, what you think they want from it, and create your idea or modify your idea around that. And of course, build your story that way. If there's a notion involved that you want to project, put that. Everything will be integrated. All your facts, all your support have to go around that core. I think of that prism as that three-sided thing. I call that the golden anchor. You think of that as like that's the anchor that your whole promotion must be connected to, because that's the thing that got them sold in the beginning.
Exactly.
And so every sentence that follows, when you're going and reviewing your copy, you want there to be tension, not overt. It doesn't have to be conscious reference to this thing, but it has to relate to that. And very often as writers, we get interested in our own ideas. We go off in tangents.
Right, exactly.
We love it. And then somebody will say, well, this is getting to be boring if you're doing it. Well, usually it's because that cord is slacking.
Yeah, you have to cut off your
Right,
sensitivity
right.
to the subject yourself.
Right. And just keep it on that core
Prism. So but
Prism,
essentially anything that you're dealing with when looking for a big idea, when you're writing the big idea, it's based on the prism.
Right.
That's, like you
Right.
said, the golden
Right.
anchor.
And so, but here's so I said the articulation of the idea. So you just because you think your idea is good, your big idea is good and or correct. First of all, correct.
Who's to
You know,
judge? Correct.
if you're working with a guru, a book writer, or something, you're writing a promotion for him, he's only interested that he's correct.
Right.
He doesn't care whether the idea is believable or emotionally compelling. He just wants to be correct. So your job as a salesperson is to turn that idea, correct or not, into something that's believable and emotionally compelling, and which means believable and something I want to believe. And so to do that, you have to figure out exactly how to articulate it. And part of that is, do I begin with a story? And if so, what is the story? Do I use actual graphic images? Would they help or would they hurt? You know, if you're selling certain types of health issues,
Right.
you know, like acid reflux or something, a lot of our bodies, we naturally think in terms of plumbing. So I like plumbing images because it's very easy for people
Right.
to understand. And or analogies, if the idea itself is a little complicated or difficult, by giving people an analogy to something else, it often helps.
Right.
So once you have the prism figured out, then you're really just at the beginning. That's your golden anchor.
Right.
And you're betting all your time and effort is going to be on this, that this is correct. But now you have to go out, all right, so let's choose what kind of lead is best for this.
Right.
Is there a story that's good? Is there a fact? Is there a prediction we could make? Could we create a secret out of this? Yeah, and
then just build the copy after
and build
that
it
into
from
that.
there. Yeah, and build it from there. Yeah. So you know, I guess what I'm saying is that we're talking about the big idea. We talked about my idea of what it is and what it isn't, why it is important. It's going to become more and more
Right.
important.
How people get it wrong.
How people generally don't understand it, and I think it's a huge mistake. It's to say that a package that's a promise package or an offer package or an invitation is a big idea just because it did well, because you can't learn anything from
Right.
it. The whole secret of being a breakthrough copywriter is to be at the avant-garde, to be at the front guard on the subject that you're working in, to kind of have a good knowledge of what your customers are reading, believing, and feeling, and so on, and then take a leap from there.
Right.
You know, you never. Oh no, I'm about to contradict myself. Unless you really need the money, don't knock off the idea by making it one step cheaper. And I mean, I'm including like when somebody took 4-minute ads and then they produced a book called 2-minute ads.
2-minute ads,
That's
30
not a
seconds.
better idea. No,
It's not a better idea.
That's not a better. That's a cheaper idea
Unbelievable.
way to knock it off. But my thing always is, what's working in this thought package? And this would apply actually to any kind of package.
Right.
What's working here that's making it so successful? And you figure out what that is. You're looking for the golden anchor, you know, that prism of thoughts, feelings, and desires. And when you decide what you think it is, then you say, how can I do it even better? You know, how could I come up with a better story, better facts,
Right.
better promises?
Reel them in better,
Right,
everything.
Right. And that's where creativity comes in, and that's where I think breakthrough packages come in. So while I'm saying that I think the big idea is more important than I ever thought it was, and today is going to be more important than ever, it still is only going to represent, you know, a minority of our advertising efforts, and we continue to need to develop those other forms of advertising and doing them with integrity. And the way to do that, I think, is always to start with the prospect and what the prism, and just build out from there.
Right. Exactly.
And by the way, if you know that, then you know everything there is to know about advertising and copywriting. Even more than David Ogilvy knew, I can say.
Well, you heard it from the master himself. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to talk to you
Great
again.
to talk
Thanks
to you
for
again.
coming. Yeah.
All right.
Bye.